Hello and welcome to another episode of Expats in Austin. If you're a newcomer, we discuss what it's like to be an expatriate living and working in this amazing city of Austin, Texas. I'm your host, Kurt Russell. This episode's about starting a business here in Austin, and it's with an Italian twist. Marco Silvestrini and his sister Francesca and her fiancé Leo founded Dolce Neve Gelato in late 2012. Marco shares with us the process from concept of Dolce Neve, the planning, the execution, and the actual launch. But it's a story, and like all good stories, the character experiences changes. He learns and he grows. Marco was really good about sharing these experiences with us in a very, very honest manner. For instance, how does an Italian from a small town in Italy end up in Austin anyway? And we asked the question, is it possible for a successful MBA consultant to really follow his own advice? Will he ever learn to modify his management style from, quote, Italian to Austinite? And what is the main purpose of gelato? Why does it exist? Do you find yourself correcting people that it's gelato, not ice cream?
I don't. I feel like, they are of course different, but at the end of the day, they are kind of siblings. And like, not everybody is familiar with gelato yet. So it is a way, if it is a way for them to get familiar with the product, like they can call it ice cream. I feel like we don't need to be snobs. At the end of the day, we are talking about a product that is made primarily to make people happy. So we don't need to be too strict with definitions.
That's kind of a business question. How do you differentiate yourself from, Baskin and Robbins as a business?
There are several differences. The first thing is everything that we do here is in small batches, while of course larger companies like the ones you mentioned, they do everything at industrial level, and everything is made not to be consumed within like a couple of days, while instead for us it is extremely important that the supply chain is short and that consumption happens as soon as possible. Another difference is the ingredients that we use. We really focus on sourcing ingredients locally or from premium suppliers, while you deal with larger ice cream companies, they cannot really focus on that, and they have to focus more on cost. It is something that instead we don't do. So we focus on quality, and like our main objective is to come up with a product that we are proud to serve to our customers.
So I hear really some really important words, things like small batches, everything's fresh. The supply chain is short. Everything, whenever possible, is local and premium and quality. So is it fair to say that you're trying to make the best gelato possible for the people who really appreciate gelato and are willing to pay for it?
Yes, but I want to go one step further. So I want to do my gelato and make sure that I make the best possible version of the gelato that I like, and make sure that I find people that are going to like it as well. I think one of the beauties of artisanal gelato, especially in Italy, is that based on where you are, you're going to find different like versions of gelato based on the ingredients that they use. So, for example, using egg yolks versus milk powder as like kind of to almost create volume in the gelato and add a little bit of thickness. So based on where you are in Italy, you're going to find like different ways of making it. And it doesn't mean that one way of making it is better than the other. It just means that it is different. So when I think about how I want to make gelato, I don't think about I want to make the best gelato in the world, because I don't think that it exists. We should all learn how to make a product that is going to be our own product. So it's not going to be like the same standardized version, but trying like to make it better on a universal level. I think we should make it better on our own level, if it makes sense.
So you use the word artisanal.
Mm-hmm.
So this speaks of being an art. Do you consider yourself an artist?
In a way, I do, but I also don't. So there is definitely a creativity component in the gelato business. That is kind of what drives me into making gelato. But we always have to remember that it is a business as well. So we need kind of to combine the two components in order to make sure that what we are selling finds a market.
I mean, I've been to Italy. It is a wonderful country to live, and actually, I had customers there. I enjoyed working there. I spent a lot of time there. Why would you leave Italy of all places?
That's a good question, and it kind of goes back to a specific point in my life. And I probably need to tell you something more about me. I've not been making gelato my entire life. In my previous life, I was a management consultant for a pretty big international firm. That was actually my very first job. And after a couple of years there, the company wanted me to get an MBA. So that was the time when I left Italy and I moved to the US. I moved to New York City. After the MBA, I had the option of going back to Italy or transferring to one of their United States offices. And that's what I decided. So at that point in my life, I thought that it made more sense for me to stay in the US, in New York in particular. So I decided to extend my permanence in the US for a little longer. So my decision to stay in the US was probably not related to making gelato at the time. I didn't know I wanted to make gelato 12, 13 years ago. That's kind of something that came up after I decided that I wanted to do something else with my life. Once I made the decision of opening a gelato shop, I never thought of going back to Italy to open one. I thought Italy already has so many great options. What can I do? How can I add value by bringing gelato to Italy? I didn't feel like it was something that I needed to do. And so I thought, where can I actually bring that value in a place where gelato is still not as evolved as in other countries? So that's when I decided to stay in the US. And at the time, I already had a green card, so it kind of made sense for me to stay here. At the same time, I was aware that New York is an extremely competitive market. And since opening a gelato shop was my first entrepreneurial experience, I didn't want to I didn't want to enter into a market that was so risky. So I knew early on that I didn't want to open a shop in New York City. I started looking around, and some of my friends, all my American friends, told me, why don't you consider Austin? It was mid 2012, and we were kind of exiting the recession of 2008, 2009. In Austin, I feel like was one of the places where the recession didn't hit as much. And there wasn't much competition from an economic perspective. And from a cultural perspective, Austin provided so many opportunities that other cities in the US did not. And so I remember visiting Austin in August 2012, and I fell in love with the city. I fell in love with the people that live here, that are so kind and so relaxed compared to people in New York City. And I fell in love with the food culture here, with all those local, the acquisition of the local community. So I felt that Austin could be the right place for me to open a gelato shop. So I moved here, and then together with my sister and her fiancé, we started working on making Dolce Neve happen.
So you did some research, you thought about Austin, you saw some opportunities here. What specific opportunities did you see here that made it better than, let's say, Tulsa, Oklahoma, or Reno, Nevada, or Springfield, Illinois? What was it about Austin?
I think the population. So I felt that from a cultural standpoint and an educational standpoint, Austin was above other places in the U.S. And already in 2012, you could tell that so many people were moving in, like already from California, or even people from New York City that were starting to move in. And those were all people that were used to a higher level of food quality. So I felt that there was a potential there in terms of customer base that could be interested in a high quality product like mine. And at the same time, there wasn't that much competition at the time. Of course, there were a couple of local ice cream chains. So we have Amy's, but from a gelato perspective, there wasn't really anything. And so there was definitely a great potential for a product like mine.
So you looked at Austin. It had good opportunities. You did your research. You got your MBA, so you know everything that goes into making a business run. And then you made your plan, and then you started to execute. How did that go?
That's actually the interesting part. So coming from a consulting background, we know a lot about designing things and designing processes and building a timeline. And but in terms of execution, I feel like we are not very used to it, because usually what we do is we come up with a nice plan, we give it to the customer, and then the customer is responsible to implement the plan. And so when I started my own company, I realized that, you know what, there are so many things that are out of your control that it becomes hard to follow a specific plan. And just to give you an example, we moved here in November 2012. And by the way, I had to postpone my trip by 1 week because at the end of October, early November, we had Sandy in New York City. And so I had to postpone my trip by already 1 week. So just to give you an idea of when you design a plan, how external factors can have an impact. And then it took us, I remember, 6 months to find the right spot. And also after living in Austin, you kind of get a better sense of how the city works. Coming from New York, you always think that the main way in which people are going to get to you is by walking to you. And instead, when you move outside New York or San Francisco or even Chicago, so those big cities that have a strong European influence, you realize that cars are actually an important element in people transportation. So when we started looking for a location, there were so many criteria we were not aware of that instead we had to start taking into consideration. So I felt those 6 months that I didn't include in my plan were fundamental to understand the city a little better. And once we understood the city, we were able to get a better sense of where we wanted to open. And then when we were able to understand where we wanted to open, we had to find an actual spot that was available. So there was a little bit more of there was this extra time that I definitely didn't consider when I developed my plan.
So you spent 6 months walking the streets of Austin looking for the best location?
Well, I didn't just walk on the streets to find the location. I had to be a little more creative with finding the right spot. But of course, we had real estate agents that helped us, but we realized that sometimes the properties on the market were not the ideal ones for us. So what we ended up doing was we actually used the Travis County tax website to find the owners of the locations that we liked. We started reaching out to them, seeing if any of the spots was becoming available soon. And we got lucky, we found one, and that's how we found the property. So the property was not on the market yet, but we really liked the area. And so we kept digging in, and we had to use some less traditional ways to find the spot that we liked. And we got lucky at the end.
What is the name of that website again, please?
Travis County, it has a portal where you can take a look at all the properties, and I think it's primarily for tax purposes. So, when you have to pay your property taxes, and in that website, it tells you like who owns what property and how much they paid of property taxes and so on.
So then you began to actually, once you found the location, you got into a contract for, to occupy the location, and then another phase of the execution plan took place, which was, I assume, machines, materials, personnel, decorations, and things like that.
There was actually a parallel step that happened before. When I was building the business plan, so it was even before I moved to Austin, my sister, she went to culinary school and she went to work in a gelato shop to actually learn how to make it. So that was another important component that happened in parallel. And once we signed the lease here, that was already May 2013, we had to develop the plans, submit the plans to the city, and then we had to start construction. And of course, in parallel, we had to find equipment, and we had to find suppliers.
It sounds like you spent at least 18 months between planning and then you actually moved down here and you were working, you're looking for a good location and then submitting all of the permits and all of the business plans and everything else. And you're spending money to get this done, but you haven't even sold a single scoop of gelato. So from the time that you actually took your first step towards creating the business plan and then actually delivering your first scoop of ice cream to a bona fide paying customer, how long was that period?
I was still working when I started developing the business plan. So I can tell you, so I was still making money. So let's say actually I stopped working in November. That is when I moved here. So I started
November 2012.
Yes. So I would say it's 14 months without getting paid.
And then, of course, there's going to be a ramp up period. You need to grow organically for the first 6 months, 12 months, and then of course there's the all important break even point. How long was the break even point for you, if you don't mind me asking?
So I can tell you that actually the ramp up was pretty quick. I think given that there wasn't much competition, we were lucky from a PR standpoint, and we were able to get people in relatively quickly. And so from an investment standpoint, we were able to recoup everything in a year and a half, probably 2 years.
Fascinating. Did you do anything before you actually opened the doors to shorten the ramp up time?
We attended a couple of events. Austin has several food-related events where chefs participate and people go there and they can taste your food. So we did a couple of those. Primarily, most of the work was done a couple of weeks before with like interviews, with publications. I think all those things are the ones that help the most.
And now you have, how many locations do you have and where are they located?
We have 3. We have 2 in Austin and 1 in Houston.
I mean, I can see a little bit of your shop behind your shoulder there. Gelato, besides the taste and flavor and quality of it, it can often be an experiential moment as well. And is that the case with coming into Dolce Neve? Is there something special about the location that makes people want to come in and stay?
I think it is, especially when, as the owners are here. I feel like sometimes people come here because they like to talk to us, and when we are not here, our employees tell us, "Look, there was customer X, Y, and Z that asked about you," and so there is that social component, and also like being able to just stay outside on the patio enjoying the gelato, forget about everything. It is a completely different experience than, let's say, eating your gelato at home or in the car. So the experience component of eating ice cream and gelato is definitely important.
Meeting, you, Francesca, Leo, is an important part of the experience. And these are all family members. What's it like working with the family so close?
It has its pros and cons. In a way, it makes communication easier because there are no barriers, but at the same time, there can be less accountability. So, like, it's harder to tell people what to do when the hierarchy is not clear. So there are moments in which, like, we kind of point fingers at each other, which, like, I believe the same thing that happens in any family, right? Especially when you have kids, that people blame each other when something has not been done. But yeah, at the same time, you don't have to worry about hurting people's feeling, right? Because you can talk to your business partner in a very direct way. And that's something that in the US is very unusual. And this is actually something that I had to learn, especially here in a gelato shop, the way in which I communicate with my employees. The European way of being direct sometimes is not the best way, especially with millennials. I realized. So that was something that we had to learn very quickly. And that is interesting because in my previous life, when I was a consultant, the direct feedback was something that was always encouraged. But then you realize that in different settings, the direct communication sometimes is not best approach, or at least if there needs to be direct communication, it needs to be provided in such a way that it's not perceived in the wrong way. The cultural component, like, I feel like it's an important element that we all had to learn. I am very rational as a person and not very emotional. And so opening this business helped me develop that emotional part that I didn't have really to worry about before.
So what's an example of how you would be more direct with a partner or an employee in, let's say, Italy, as opposed to here in Austin?
Well, in Italy, I would say you did this wrong, and this needs to be done differently. And I would do this in person, or if let's say that I find it right away and the person is not in front of me, I would just text this person or email this person. Something that I realized here is that if you have to provide constructive feedback, here it's always better to do it in person, because text and email can be interpreted in a confrontational way, even if that is not the intent of the text and message. Sometimes the intent is, I'm going to do it through text or email because otherwise I'm going to forget and I don't know when it's going to be the next time I see you. There is no, like, our intent is not to be passive aggressive. It's just, let me do this now, otherwise I'm going to forget. And I will not tell the person, you did this wrong. I will tell the person, oh, I saw that you did this in this specific way, and I would prefer if you were doing this in this other way. But you did all these other 10 things right. So, which from like an European perspective, doing something right sometimes is taken for granted. And we just don't discuss about things that are done well. We just discuss about things that need to be done differently.
Do you have a preference?
If I have a preference?
Yes.
Yes, I do. I do. And I think another reason, since English is not my first language, for me, it is much easier to not to worry about form, just worry about content. And I would just prefer if we were all a little more, like, not rational in a way, but probably rational is not the right word. I will just prefer that we were more willing to accept and provide criticism, which is something more common in Europe and a little less common here. I feel like even here, getting the feedback for us is difficult. Not every time when we do things wrong, our employees tell us we want things to be done in a different way. They should be free to come to us and tell us what they like and what they don't like.
You would like them to be as direct with you as you would like to be as direct with them. Is that a fair way to say it?
Yes, that's correct.
What is the biggest challenge you've faced in setting up a business over here?
I think in general, employees is the biggest challenge. In general, like in a small, I didn't realize that employees would have been a big challenge until I owned my own business. And when you're in consulting, you're dealing with people that work in your team, and then you're dealing with the clients. And the people within your team, they're always going to be driven and motivated, and they have a goal that is aligned with yours. So it is very easy to deal with them. With the client, it becomes a little more complicated because they have their own agenda. But usually you deal with, I used to deal with managerial level and top level, so it's easy to have a conversation with them. And here instead, we have to deal with people that sometimes do not have making gelato or serving gelato as their long-term objective. It's just, so that's when like the issues start, when people have a different agenda from yours. So how you keep them motivated and how you make sure that you find the right talent, that has been complicated.
Anything that you would do, what would you do differently now that you've done this, you're 9 years into the game now? What would you do differently?
I think so. Every time I open a new store, I realize that I made some mistakes that if I could go back, like I would like not make. So one example is, so when we opened the Houston location, for example, I think I didn't know the city that well, and I like interviewed people and asked people, and so I trust their judgment more than I trusted my own. If I could go back, I would apply the same technique that I use here in Austin, that is really wait for like 5 or 6 months to see like what place is going to work well, and know the market a little more. And this last one that we opened, the second location that we opened in Austin, that one is a little harder to get a sense on because we opened that one in the middle of the pandemic. So the question would be, was there anything we could have done to maybe wait a little longer? Or, but yeah, I feel like there is always something that we can learn from our own mistakes. Sometimes I think it's the replicating factor that influences us. So like we think, when we make something in one specific way, in one specific location, that you can replicate exactly like it is everywhere else. Instead, we need to understand that each place is going to have its own specificities, and we need to adapt to those.
You mentioned that you spent some time in New York City. I read a little bit about you on the website, and you said that you found innovation and combinations there that you had not experienced before. It was really quite wide in terms of gelato. What's the craziest or strangest combination that you came across in New York City?
So to be honest, in New York, I didn't really see I didn't see strange combinations. I feel there are some places that do very strange combinations in terms of ice cream flavors, but this is not really what I am looking for. In terms of the creative process, at least for us, the way in which it works is we get either inspired by desserts that we eat, and that can be everywhere. So like if we are traveling to San Francisco and we go to a restaurant and we love a dessert, we think of ways to make it work in gelato form. Or another way is a farmer brings us an ingredient and they tell us, is there anything that you guys can do with it? So we start like our creative process starting from the ingredient itself, and we think what can work well with it. So this is usually how our creative process works.
So Leo, Francesca, and Marco all get together and have a brainstorming session together. Is that correct?
I think it's more an individual process. So each one comes up with an idea, and then when the idea comes out, we just test it and see if it works. So it is not necessarily we sit on the table and we talk for 1 hour and we decide on how to combine it. I think that is one of the reasons why having a family business actually works. So sometimes we may just discuss at dinner time and we say, oh, look, I want to do this flavor. And then there may be a small input from one of the others. And the next day we try. But there is not a formal process. It is very informal.
Right. One of the nice things about coming to Dolce Neve is we get to speak with the owners, and you're willing to come out and talk to the customers, and there's this nice interaction between yourselves and the customers. So now you've lived here for a long time. You've got family back in Italy. What myths or misunderstandings about Americans would you like to clear up with your friends and family back in Italy?
I think, first of all, it's wrong to categorize all the Americans as Americans. People that live in Austin are going to be different from people that live in Dallas or in a rural town in East Texas, or people in New York City. So as in Italy, people in Milan are going to be different from people in like Naples. We need to be aware that there are so many nuances within the US itself that we shouldn't try to put everybody in the same box. And so already starting from like that perspective, I can tell you a couple of things that I realized. First of all, people think that Americans have no taste in terms of food, especially, and that they just want to eat burgers and steaks and like macaroni and cheese, like all those basic things. That's not true at all. People, especially here in Austin, are looking for more refined and elaborated food, high quality ingredients. Especially lately, I would say in the last like 10 years, the quality of the ingredients has improved drastically. Second is people here like variety. We like even here in Austin, you can find ramen shops, Vietnamese restaurants, Indian, Tex-Mex, interior Mexican. So the diversity in the American population is something that like makes it unique. So it's going back to my point before, it's not just about the generic American food that people may think Americans are looking for.
Marco, you've been fantastic. Thank you very, very much for your time. I really enjoyed it.
Okay.
Thank you, man. Wonderful talking to you. I hope to meet you in person.
Bye.
Spending time with Marco and discussing all of this with him was like a case study in project management basics. You know the basics. You have the specification, 1, you've got the time, 2, and then you have the budget, the money. So the specification says, when we're done with it, it's going to look like this. Time says, well, we only have this amount of time. We've got to finish by this date. And the money is all about the budget. We can spend this much money, but no more. Everybody says, ready. Everybody gets up, heads for the door, and we say, go. And as soon as we step out the door, outside influences impact us. Unpredictable things. The changes are going to come. And any changes in specification, time, or money must require the changes or modifications in one or both of the other two. For instance, how could he possibly have planned for Superstorm Sandy to delay him by more than a week? And now we're in the middle of a pandemic that's lasted more than a year. And Ice Storm Uri, just to throw a little bit of salt in the wounds, we might not know the exact nature of any particular disruption, but we can plan for the disruptions. And it's a matter of how quickly we adjust that is so essential in keeping a project on the rails. For instance, why would a business consultant with an MBA know anything about human resource management? Marco tells us you gotta learn quickly how important people are. And people are different, very different. And in my opinion, this was one of Marco's biggest lessons that he shared with us. My favorite comments from Marco were things like, gelato and ice cream are siblings. There's no reason to be snobby about it. And this is also good. Gelato exists to make people happy. And then he says he wants to make gelato his way. Doesn't have to be the best in the world. It just needs to be the best that he can make using local sourced ingredients, using his own method. And by the way, when you get down there, you're just going to have to try goat cheese and pecan. It's fantastic. I want to say a special thank you to Marco. We did this interview online and remote. He spent so much time with us. He patiently answered my questions from the lobby of Dolce Neve, and when customers came in, he'd dash back around behind the bar and serve the customers, and then come back in and start answering more questions. He never missed a beat. The links to Dolce Neve Gelato can be found in the show notes below. And now a special thank you to you, dear listener. We really appreciate you spending your valuable time with us. Remember, Expats in Austin is about you and for you. With that in mind, we've set up a new Expats in Austin Facebook group. Please join the group and let us know what you want to hear and to discuss. Remember, it takes an expat to know an expat. Expats in Austin.